So here's a question. Can people who are in heaven see what happens on earth? This is something that I think stems from a very personal and experiential kind of question. When we lose loved ones, when folks go on to heaven from this life, what does that mean? You know, what bridges the gaps? What bridges the gaps? What kind of experience can be said to be shared? What connection remains between us and those who have already gone home? These are questions that many wonder, and for good reason. And there's a verse that many try to look at. It's in Hebrews, I believe 12, and in Hebrews chapter 12, verse number 1. It says that we're compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, and this is who many believe is the Apostle Paul talking here, and he's saying that we, on this view, he's saying that there are those watching us in heaven. They're watching us run our race, and they are eagerly cheering us on, and they are watching us. They're watching what we do. And so many have used this verse and this understanding of Scripture to attempt to bridge that gap between the here and now and the eternal heaven. And this is something that we want to be careful, because it's usually asked with a lot of personal context behind it, and nevertheless, we must interpret Scripture with Scripture. And there are multiple ways, not multiple ways of interpreting Scripture that are right, okay? But what we do have is multiple angles that we can come from to look and see what a particular Scripture means. And we especially need to be careful to do this on matters that are not clear, on matters that are not spoken to all throughout the Bible. And so that I'm aware, this is the only place where in the Bible it speaks to the nature, or even could be speaking to the nature of this kind of thing. And so the question is it really dealing with that? And what's interesting is, and I hope I don't burst too many bubbles here, but I don't believe that's the proper understanding of Scripture in that case. And here's the reason why. The entire chapter before, there are multiple ways to understand context. You should look at the verses immediately before and immediately after a particular verse that you're looking at. You should look at the entire chapter. You should look at the chapters that are before and after. So as you get into the wider context, you begin, the more context you have, the more insight you have into the meaning of a passage, okay? And in this particular case, if we just look back one passage to Hebrews chapter 11, you'll find one of the most popular, well-known passages in the Bible. It's called commonly the Hall of Faith. And it deals with these Old Testament heroes of the faith and what it is that they did and different circumstances that they faced in their life, and how they overcame them through their faith, and how they were rescued. And there is a connecting word that begins verse number 1 of chapter 12, and it says, "Wherefore we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses." And it goes on, "Let us lay aside every weight and run confidently the race that was set before us," and so on. And so if we look at the immediate context there's nothing in the context to suggest at all that what we're dealing with is people watching us from heaven. But rather, it's talking about the fact that we are among a group of people who God has been working with throughout history to bring about not only His purposes, but to bring them into relationships with Him, to get to know God and who God is, and share that with others, and to live a life of great faith. In fact, God places so much emphasis on faith. He literally says that without faith, it is impossible to please Him. And that is in Hebrews chapter 11. And so what we find when looking at it very carefully is that it has nothing to do with people who are looking down on us. We are not compassed about by them in that they are watching us in some kind of coliseum as though they are spectators. No, rather they are already there, having received their reward, not to be worried with the cares and toils and concerns of this world, but rather we ought to be concerned with the life and the legacy of faith that they have left for us. And with that in mind, we should therefore take up our mantle. We should take the torch and now begin to run our race.